Hello again. This is now the tarot process part 2. And I think I have 3 points to make. One is that in part 1, I realized afterwards I'd left some things out. But that's what happens. So this is the tarot process. When you do a reading, later, if you think back on it, you often will think to yourself, I should have said that, or I could have said that, or what if I had said this, or how could I miss that? And I think it's important to not do that, to not beat yourself up, and not imagine what you could have said or what you should have said, because you said what you said and it was right at the time, because it works like that. And I'm thinking, imagine somebody's talking to you and you're listening to what they're saying, but you come to a certain point where you think, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to hear any more, or stop talking, or, tell me something else, or let's change the subject. And in the same way, during a reading, you can be talking about a card and you can say something, but you don't know how the questioner is taking it, and they might be thinking, okay, I've had enough, let's move on to something else. So even at that moment, if you'd said something totally brilliant, they wouldn't have heard it, or they would have misunderstood it, or they would have automatically rejected it because they weren't in the mood to hear what you had to say. So you can't, or it's a mistake, I think, after a reading, to go over it in your mind and think, I should have said this, I should have said that. Only because it's not realistic, and also because you don't know how the person's reacting, how they're taking it. Because you can say something and everything is good, but then you say something too much and it just ruins the moment. And that's something to remember as well. If you'd said that wonderful thing you'd thought of today, if you'd said it yesterday during the reading, it would have spoiled it. And I think that's the way we should look at readings. Because if you've got somebody and you've got half an hour, what can you do? What can you tell them? You can give them some ideas or some information or some suggestions, or plant some seeds that later will develop into something good for the questioner. But then they leave the room and they go off back into their life. So you can't really give them that much. You can do a certain amount, and I think the tarot is very powerful and can do that, but don't think about it afterwards and beat yourself up, because the fact that you didn't say it is because you weren't supposed to say it, or it would have been misunderstood, not that you're a bad reader or you don't know anything. So I'm saying don't beat yourself up, and I mean that in a general sense as well. In your own life, don't beat yourself up. If you do something and it has a bad outcome, it had a bad outcome. So if it happens again, don't handle it the same way. If we remember this cause and effect, I have this pen, right? If I let it go, it falls on the table. So if I don't like the effect of the pen hitting the table and making a noise, don't let go. So the cause was letting go. So what you do is you understand that there's cause and effect. And if you don't like the outcome, you don't try and change the outcome, you change the cause. So if you do something that you later consider to be bad or unwelcome or not very sensible or whatever it happens to be, if there's something you didn't like, rather than beat yourself up, my wife Susan, if there's something out of place, then everything's out of place. Or if there's something that goes wrong, then we're all doomed. She sort of takes something that isn't quite right and runs with it and turns it into this major obstacle. Whereas I don't. I mean, in some ways this is where my laziness helps, because okay, I do something wrong, I do something stupid, and then I think, but instead of agonizing over it as I could, I think, who can be bothered, and just move on. So I don't really care that much about what happened in the past. However, if you've done something you didn't like, so what do? You look at what happened or how you reacted or what brought the thing about in the first place and decide, if it happens again, I'm not going to act the same way. I'll try this different thing. And then if it does happen again, and sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. If it does happen again and you do this thing and you still don't like the outcome, you go back to it. There's cause and effect. I'm going to change the cause again. And so over time, you end up figuring things out and developing new ways of dealing with situations that are more sensible and wiser, because you become wise every time you look at a situation and choose differently or choose to handle it differently. It's like Glenn in The Walking Dead, who was explaining something to somebody and said, you're imagining what can go wrong. So you not because you expect it to go wrong, but so you can be prepared. So I think that's quite good information, good idea. So don't beat yourself up with tarot cards or in your own life. And I think that was point one for the process. So let me look over here. I wrote down speech versus talk because I've been writing this, I've been kind of writing this book on understanding Hamlet. It is. And so I happened to watch this academic give a speech or give a talk about Hamlet, about Shakespeare. And it was really boring because he sat at a table. I sat behind a table and he had a prepared presentation in front of him and he read word for word what he'd written maybe 6 months ago. And it was really boring. The subject isn't boring, but the way he was talking, because it was all, he had written it, he wasn't speaking it. And so there's something about, if you turn a card and just talk about it in the moment with the questioner, you find that it works and you hit the nail on the head and things flow. But if you turn a card and then go, okay, up here, I've got this thing I read 3 weeks ago, and you try to regurgitate the paragraph or the ideas, it's boring and it doesn't connect with the questioner. So remember, you're talking, you're not giving a speech or reading something, even if it's something you wrote, you still don't want to read it. You're much better, it flows better. And I'll get to flow in part 3 with Vinny, as well as at the end with Alexander. But things flow better if you just talk. And remember not to beat yourself up while you're talking. And it'll work. I need to look over here. Point 3, that was maybe point 1.5. Point 2 or maybe point 3 is, you have to remember everybody's different. Even if we share similar things, or we have similar things in common, we're still really different. And I think it's important to remember that what I like or what makes sense to me is not going to make sense to everybody. And a lot of people are not going to like it. I mean, it's like, who's your favorite band? You know, and you pick, the answer, of course, is New Order. Ceremony by New Order, as well as The Perfect Kiss and the various other songs that they've written. Okay, so I say that, but you may think, no, it's The Who, or it's whatever it happens to be. So I think we have to remember that people are different, which means that I turn a card and I tell one person, this is what's happening, this is what it means, and they understand it a certain way. But somebody else could get the same card 10 minutes later. I'm not going to say the same thing because I'm dealing with a different person. And you can't assume that people are the same. And this is the value of being in the moment and just letting yourself go and talk. And I'm going to get to intuition near the end because that's an important factor. So people are not the same. Even if you get two people in the same office doing the same job and they've got the same qualifications, how they got there will have been different. How they reacted to certain circumstances would have been different. So they may be in the same place at the same time, doing the same job, but they're not the same people. So I think we should remember that that we can't assume that because the last person we did a reading for had the Tower card and they're getting divorced, that because the Tower card comes up for the next person, that doesn't mean they're getting divorced as well. I was thinking of something a moment ago when I was saying that. Can't remember it. Okay, yeah, I can remember it. Okay, so we can't assume that other people are like us or are got to the same position that we're in the same way we did, with the same actions and reactions and people and experiences. And I'm thinking of the Eight of Swords, which shows somebody bound and tied with swords around them. And it looks like restriction. So you can't turn the Eight of Swords and immediately think, oh no, restriction. Because some people don't like to have to make decisions. And some people like to be told what to do. So what's going to happen? And you turn the Eight of Swords. For one person, it's not going to be pleasant because they're bound. For another person, they're going to be happy because finally somebody's going to tell me what to do and I don't have to make a decision. So you can't assume that people are a certain way or that other people are like you, because you can turn the Eight of Swords and think, I hate that card. So when it comes up, I'm going to tell the person something, you're not going to like this. But who knows? You don't know that. With that in mind, when I do a reading for someone, I ask them to pick a number between 1 and 9 and another number between 0 and 22. And that gives me two major trumps that I can talk about, that give the questioner an idea of the situation that they're in at the moment and what can be expected now and going into the future. So it's a starting point. And then I pick cards and answer questions, but on top of or based upon the kind of situation that they're in. So if they pick 1 and 19, the Magician and the Sun card, they're confident and optimistic. So if delays show up, they're not going to be fazed by them. They're not going to be upset too much. Whereas if somebody chooses, let's say 9 and 16, the Hermit and the Tower, that's a very different kind of person. Or it's the same person, but they're in a very different frame of mind. So with 9 and 16, and a problem card shows up, or a card indicating difficulties shows up, it's going to be much more difficult for that individual to deal with the particular card just because of their need to retreat from the world for a bit, from the Hermit, and also sort themselves out a bit because of the Tower card. So point number 2 is don't assume we're all the same, or remember that we're all very different when you're doing a reading. And just because you like it or it would be your choice, it doesn't mean it's the questioner's choice. And I think what we ought to do is pick a card or choose numbers to get an idea of who it is that we're actually dealing with. Because depending on who you're dealing with, you would say certain things rather than other things. Let's say you've got a friend who's struggling and they come along and you're talking to them. Maybe first you give them some encouragement or remind them of things that worked out well so that they're not a complete idiot and they can understand they're not a complete idiot. Whereas if it's somebody who is optimistic and upbeat, but they've got a problem, maybe you don't feel the need to cheer them up a bit first. So you can immediately deal with the problem, let's say, or remind them of things that didn't work out in the past, and they won't take it the wrong way. So again, you would naturally do this anyway with your friends, I think, because you're sensitive to your friends. So pick a card or a couple of cards or get some numbers and get an idea of the state of mind of the questioner at that time. Because remember, all you can do is give them some information, give them some ideas, plant some seeds. Where am I? Point the card. Reading who's personal now. Okay, so this takes me to Jordan Peterson. I watched a lot of his videos a while ago about Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, the Bible, Pinocchio. And I think he's very interesting when he's being a journalist, right? When he's telling you what he discovered from his reading or from his conversations with other people. But he's an academic. He went to University of Ottawa, then Harvard, now he's at U of T, University of Toronto. And he's a consulting psychologist when he's not on YouTube. Anyway, so I watched him, and I think he's useful and interesting because he saves you a lot of time. And you can think about, so when he's talking about Nietzsche's already done. Nietzsche's complete, and you've got the written word. So there's Jordan, there's Nietzsche, and there's you, the audience. When you turn a card, you're looking at the card itself and sort of bouncing from the card up to the questioner. So in the same way that with a journalist has got a story to tell or information to pass on, maybe when you look at the card, you tell them the story of the card, or you give them the headline from the newspaper. But there's something about having a card and using the card as the foundation or the jumping off point for the information that you're giving the questioner. So when Jordan Peterson talks about Nietzsche, that's fine. Whereas it turns out he's got this self-analysis personality test procedure that you can go through. And you write an essay. I can't remember what the details are. But the reason I'm telling you this is because my son, who's 30-something, he told me he was doing this Jordan Peterson thing. And he was going to start with, there's a section where you write down your faults. And I think what you're supposed to do is you write them down, then you know about them. So my son was telling me about how he was going to start with the faults. And I said, why are you starting with what's bad or what's wrong? Because remember, we get back what we give out. If you're focused on what's wrong, you're going to get back more of what's wrong. So why not, instead of focusing on what's wrong, forget about what's wrong. Concentrate on what's right or what's going well or what you want or what direction you want to go in. And you'll get some of that back. So it's the difference for Jordan Peterson between him telling you about Nietzsche and him giving you his personal take. And that's like the difference between looking at a card and using it as the basis of what you tell the person, or starting with you and using your intuition and just going straight to the questioner and sort of bypassing the card. And I think that's a mistake, because with Jordan Peterson, I'm really reluctant to talk about astrology because people don't get it, and especially people doing on the internet who talk astrology, or basically it's rubbish. And I shouldn't say that, but I just did, and I'm going to leave this in. So anyway, there's an awful lot they don't consider and they don't know, and it makes a difference. I was told it takes 3 lifetimes to learn astrology. And these people have been at it for an hour and a half. You know, they've got a lot to do before they can call themselves astrologers. Anyway, the planet Mars in a horoscope represents personal creative energy. Right? So Jordan Peterson has his Mars at 10 degrees of Taurus. The portion of the zodiac between 10 and 20 Taurus, the key characteristic is struggle. So Jordan, when it comes to his personal creative energy, he struggles. Opposite the 10 to 20 Taurus is 10 to 20 Scorpio. And the key idea for that part of the zodiac is responsibility. So if you've ever heard Jordan talk about his rules for living, one of them is accept responsibility. So that's good common sense, and we should be responsible. But the thing is, my son has the sun and moon at late degrees of Taurus. He has enough responsibility for a small army. right? So when it comes to his personal creative energy, he doesn't need more responsibility or to be more responsible, because he already is. But by focusing on Jordan's method and figuring out his faults, which may not be actual faults anyway, because we can misperceive what's going on. But anyway, so I'm getting a bit lost here. Jordan. Okay, so Jordan's got Mars in that part of the zodiac. And the thing is, psychologists are always talking about themselves, but they don't realize it, I think. So Jordan's, if you have planets in the middle of Taurus, Jordan Peterson is relevant for you. I think relevance is the correct word. Whereas if you don't have planets in the middle of Taurus, Jordan Peterson's suggestions are all very well and good common sense, but not that relevant for you. I forget why I was telling you all that. But anyway, so we're all very different. That it has to do with intuition. People want to be intuitive tarot readers. By all means, be intuitive, but look at the picture on the card and then let your intuition flow if you want. Don't ignore the card, or as some people do, they treat it as a starting point or a jumping off point. It kind of is, but it's really not, because it's so easy to think you don't need the tarot, but you do. If you're going to be an intuitive tarot reader, step 1 is the tarot card itself, and step 2 is you. But I think that a lot of people who consider themselves intuitive tarot readers start with them, and then they throw in a little bit of the tarot. And I think the emphasis in that way is wrong. And you're better to start with the card and then have your input. Okay. Alexander Waugh is an English writer, musician, or I don't know if he's a musician. He used to be an opera critic. And I'm going to give you a link in the description for a 2-minute clip, which is part of a film or a TV show that he made. It was an hour-long thing. It was called The Piano, A Love Affair. And I've got more of this next time in part 3, because I'm going to talk about Vinny, who's a drummer with Frank Zappa. Brilliant and really interesting about how to read. You'll be surprised how to read tarot cards. His method for drumming and practicing drumming is totally useful for reading tarot cards. Anyway, so the bit in the clip, I've written some of it here, and I'll tell you what he says. But he talks about how I'll just read it. When you get the balance of listening, he's playing the piano at this point, or he's just been playing the piano. When you get the balance of listening to yourself and concentrating and playing, there's nowhere land where your brain is. So then he does a little bit I'm going to leave out. He says he thinks the root of this piano obsession is that he's trying to get into that little slot of your brain where things don't exist and yet they're working perfectly. It's a sort of heaven and nirvana. And I think that's what we should aim to be, or to become, or to be. That's this kind of state of mind we should aim to have when we're doing a tarot reading. And I'll tell you more about how to get there. But imagine if you're in that slot of your brain where nothing exists, you're in harmony, and everything is working. Your thoughts, your intuitions will be correct and totally 100% relevant and pertinent for the questioner. And there'll be little beautiful seeds that will turn into these magnificent, whatever it's a seed of. And I think that's what we should aim for if we're going to do a reading, to find this slot where nothing exists but everything is in perfect working order. So people can do it through meditation or through deep breathing, maybe, But I think we should maybe aim to find that slot in our brain all day, every day, rather than think, okay, I'm going to do a tarot reading. I need 10 minutes to get psyched up for it. I think we should maybe aim to be psyched up all the time. I can't remember what else I was going to say. Anyway, maybe the fact that Alexander, through his music, discovered this idea of the slot in your brain, and now that I've told you, or maybe you already knew it, if you can, a musician once said, if you can't hear the note, you can't play it. So there's something about what's in our mind exists in some way, then we just need to express it. But if it's not in our mind, we can't express it. So Alexander's idea of the slot in your brain where nothing exists but everything works perfectly, maybe that's what we should aim for when we're doing a reading. Okay, I've finished. Part 3 will be in a couple of days. Also, I looked at the comments from before, from part 1. I replied to some of them too. So I will look at comments. But anyway, that's me for the day. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. Okay, bye-bye.